How's everyone doing? Dave Thompson with Bare Bones Leadership. Today, we're going to discuss strategies for people stepping into leadership roles for the first time. When we talk about leadership roles, we're talking about appointed leadership, assumed leadership, and people of influence. If you find yourself in a position where you're training or showing other people what to do, instructing without an appointed position, there certainly is an assumed and or position of influence over others. So today, the takeaways will be some effective strategies and things to kind of build a healthy foundation. There's the question of, are leaders born or are they made? Well, everyone is born with certain capabilities, right? Certain aptitudes for different things. And no two people have the exact same aptitude and level of competence, or as things come naturally to them on different levels as anyone else. That's what makes us uniquely different. So the short answer is, people can be born with certain abilities, certain charisma, and certain ways of communicating that are effective than certainly other people. Other people's environments, belief systems, principles, morals, and those kind of things play a huge role in what makes an effective leader. If you're falling short in one area or another, that's when you can certainly develop yourself and hone yourself into an effective leader. The very first thing that we talk about here at Bare Bones is doing a no shit self-assessment. When we talk about that, it has to be coming from a place of complete and utter honesty. And that's where the difficulty lies. Human beings look for comfort, right? They look for the easy way. And that's not just like a psychological or a habit, you know what I mean? Like a negative connotation. The brain wants to store different chemicals for longevity and survival and those things. So a little of that's instinctual. You have to understand, though, that having any type of ego when it comes to doing a self-assessment will make it not worth your while. It will be a fool's errand at very best. Understand where you stand. Get feedback from trusted people and people who you wouldn't necessarily engage with on a day-to-day. Get some honest feedback. Gauge your ceiling. Do a self-assessment. What are your strengths? The things that you would like to sustain and maintain going forward, and things that you need to improve. For instance, if you're not a good communicator, that is one of the top aptitudes, one of the top necessities for a leader is to be able to be an effective communicator. Do a deep dive. Do look up and look into anything and everything you can about communication. Not just the spoken word, the written word, and nonverbal communication. Leadership's work. Leadership is a lot of work, and it starts and stops with you. So the first thing is the self-assessment. Understand where you land. Be self-aware of not only your strengths, because those tend to just shine through, right? Keep on working on your strengths, but certainly double down on your weaknesses, and don't shy away from them. Those are the building blocks to you being an effective leader, is your weaknesses. Your weaknesses are the way. There's all different types of leadership styles. And there truly are situational dependent, right? They're situation dependent. Where you work, the type of work, the amount of people in your charge, the goals, the risks, the capabilities of your people, training, resources. There's all different types of leadership strategies. Now, do I think as a new leader that you need to hone in and dial in on one specific strategy or leadership style? I don't necessarily agree with that. I believe that one specific goal may necessitate one style, and then in different settings, different circumstances, it may require a different leadership style. I believe you should be practiced in as many as you can that are effective in your setting, in what you're doing. Total authoritarian type style, like total authority type, may work, right, temporarily in very high pressure situations when, the proverbial shit's hitting the fan. That may be very effective. And then, the discussions can be had afterward. But from then, that style may need to be backed off after that high pressure situation. And then you roll into a different style altogether. And there's a ton of styles out there. And that is part of the process of developing yourself into that leader. Research and get into each one of the styles. And at the end of the day, though, I think that you will filter out what works for you in your climate, in your environment, in your people, what is most effective, and then filter out everything that is ineffective for you at that time. But the assessments never stop, right? If you find yourself getting at a plateau with your team, with your division, within the organization, maybe it's time to reassess, do another assessment, find out where you are, gauge how that style is working, if it's effective or not. And then adjust, be fluid, right? You're not being fake or disingenuous. You're, adapting and overcoming to different situations and different environments. Things change all the time. Things change, things evolve. And if you're not doing so as a leader, you're doing yourself and your team a huge disservice. And then leverage that style effectively, right? How do you leverage it? Well, you try to become a master of the fundamentals, right? Master of the basics. That's where that's where most of the work is done, right? That's where you find most of the answers, is becoming so familiar with the basics that it's second nature. There was, I don't know if there's this as much anymore, but there was a big fad out there as far as, think outside the box, look outside the box. That tends to become quite a crutch and a cop-out for not mastering the fundamentals and basics. If we're using the law of probability, the answers are well within the box for the majority of the time. The high percentage of the time, the answers are already in the box. But again, humans looking for comfort and looking for the easy path will try to make up or outthink something that is easy for a few minutes, right? A patch, a band-aid, something to get by, and then call it thinking outside the box, when it really was an easy way out. Master the basics, right? Especially in a new leadership role. Understanding the basics and applying them, although not easy, right? Basics, simple fundamentals are never easy. They're never easy, but they are absolutely sustainable. A hell of a lot more sustainable than the easy way out, right? The complex, the putting layers upon layers and thinking outside the box and, reinventing the wheel and, whatever it takes, pacifying people and situations, all that stuff's rather easy, right? It's a quick fix. Those are simple, but they're not sustainable, right? They're band-aids. And as a new leader, you're looking for as many permanent, sustainable solutions to organizational and people problems. That's what we're looking for, right? The most sustainable. And it requires work, a lot of extra work and effort. And that's one of the intangibles that is severely underrated these days, in my experience, is the willingness to go above and beyond. What your reasons are yours and yours alone. And they'll probably be driven by your own personal principles and values, right? Whatever your moral compass is what will drive that. But a lot of those things that are needed to be an effective leader are not, you won't find them in a classroom. You won't find them in a book. They're the intangibles that are grown and developed through years and years of systems, routines, and habits. And they're so ingrained that they go from the conscious to the subconscious. And that's how these intangible characteristics get established. And through your self-assessment, if you find voids in those intangibles or realize that you are lacking in certain ones, it's not too late. It's not too late. And we'll get into some, and I will link in some resources in the description of this video. If you find any value in this video, please like, subscribe, and share. It's huge. It helps us a lot. I will link in some resources and some great books to help develop yourself. And I know it sounds contradictory that you won't find it in a book, meaning that you won't read a line or grab a quick social media post and have it click that it makes sense, and then that's it. You know, it's not going to abracadabra itself into your life. It won't happen that way. You have to make a conscious effort into changing routines, habits, and systems in order for anything to be sustainable, to develop yourself into a leadership role. And that's what, in my opinion, most organizations are lacking, is true effective leadership. And this part is, we'll get into, is more for the appointed leaders, right? And not that it isn't, it doesn't apply to assumed or influential people. More so of the influential people, you already have this to an extent. If you find yourself in a position where you're being asked questions or asked for your points of view or your perspective or advice or any of these other things, I'm willing to guess more often than not, by nonverbal communication, you have already established some trust and credibility within your teammates, your coworkers, your peers. On some level within your organization, you developed some trust and credibility. Now, if you're an appointed leader and you have kind of floated around the edges a little bit, maybe have been fast-tracked, maybe have shown a lot of capability, and as far as the X's and the O's of your division, team, organization, and there's nothing wrong with that, right? So I just want to throw that caveat out real quick. There's nothing wrong with ascending like that. There isn't. Here's the downfall. When you are now in a position to deal with human beings and have the responsibility of human beings, building trust and credibility within that group is huge. And here's the kick in the nuts. You do not have one single say in how anybody sees you. That's beyond your control. The only thing that you can do is put yourself in a position to be trusted and to be credible. Okay? You're not going to just show up at the very first meeting or introductions and say, you're going to trust me, I'm credible, you believe it, and you know, everything will be hunky-dory from here on out. And that's not the way it works. You have to. And again, that will show through a lot based on your own personal values and principles and moral compass. One thing I can say through experience is that those things will not be built from behind a desk. You can't blindly trust somebody, right? And it's like anything else. Nothing in this world is free, right? There's an exchange, and there's exchange with trust and credibility and respect and those type of characteristics and tangible back and forths between human beings. Where that transaction has to start is with you as a leader. You have to show trust to get trust. You have to be credible to see credibility in someone else, right? And that means communicating effectively and being as transparent as you possibly can. It means, at least in your professional world, at the very least in your professional world, living within a code of conduct, a set of ethos that are non-negotiable within yourself. They're non-negotiable, right? And whatever they may be. And again, that's up to you as a leader to figure that out. And it's not easy, right? It's not easy to develop a system, a routine, habits of being open, being honest, being, a good, forthright communicator, having the best intentions. Another part of that too is ask yourself this question. Are you in that position because you have buy-in and believability in the goals that the organization is setting? If not, are you just there as a means to an end? And if you are, be that. Say that. Live that. Be open about that, right? I've seen it. My personal perspective on that is, again, I don't begrudge anybody for moving up. If that's your approach, if that's your belief, if that's your way of doing things, then that's it's all good, right? You do you, however, do no harm. Do what you have to do to make yourself safe, secure, provide your family stability, whatever it takes. But at the end of the day, do no harm, right? If you're not in a buy-in position to better the whole, right? If you haven't, as a leader, set goals for your team, right? And the goals include somewhat of a long-term vision with a 1, 3, 5, 10-year plan moving forward for your teams as individuals and as a group, and that buy-in isn't there, be honest. Just, this is what I'm here for. I'm here for A, B, and C, right? And that's, it is what it is. You will earn more credibility that way than trying to fake it, right? Trying to be the company guy, but inside you're just there for a paycheck, right? People see right through that. And in certain organizations and certain institutions and places of work, it can be understandable, right? Being accepted, that's not always the case as far as being accepted. But being understood, yeah, it is what it is. As far as earning individuals' trust, you have to talk to your teams. You have to talk to your people. And that is across the board. You have to know your people. On a practical side, in practical terms, it's very difficult to employ your teams to different tasks without knowing them and their capabilities. And again, you can rely on second, third-hand information, whatever two-dimensional data or matrices you come across from behind a desk. You're still missing that third dimension. Go talk to these people. Go talk to your people. Go talk to them. They are your teammates. They bring more to the table than is probably what's given credit for. Even at the end of the day, if they turn out to be the biggest shitbags your organization has ever seen, the value in that is you know exactly what isn't going to be effective within your teams, what you can push back on as far as the next person coming in, and what is tolerable and intolerable moving forward. You can adjust, your standards and your whatever procedures and policies and internal standards you might have for your teams. So everyone brings something of value, right? And while you're doing this, do everything that you can possibly do to be consistent. To be consistent as possible. Again, from my perspective and my experience, when I first was in my first major leadership role, and I had a considerable number of people to lead in an appointed position, I went in pretty rigid, right? I believe the word asshole was used, and that was fair, for sure. That was calculated. I am no smarter or more intelligent than any other leader by any stretch. Knowing the alpha mentality that we were working under, in my humble opinion, it gave me the best option to go in rigid and having the ability to back up when needed. To be a little cold and calculated and matter of fact, and then as situations dictated, back off a little bit, right? And use a little bit more empathy, a little bit more compassion when needed. But when it was time to drop the hammer, it was time to drop the hammer. And that turned out to be somewhat effective, right? It turned out to be as effective, I guess, as we could have made it together. The one thing I can say for certain is, and was, and still is, my consistency. I believe consistency is incredibly, incredibly important. Be who you pretend to be consistently. We all are a product of something, right? We're a product of our upbringing, our values, our belief systems, our family environment, our churches, our schools, our all different things, but we are constructed into what we are. So when somebody gives me or says to me, well, that's just who I am. Yeah. We are who we want to be and who we were constructed to be. We didn't just come out of the womb and here I am. This is me. I'm stuck with it. That gives new leaders room to grow and develop into the leader that they feel is the most effective in their environment, in their teams, in their groups and divisions and organizations and institutions. You're not pigeonholed into, well, that's just who I am. That's a fucking crutch. Excuse my language, but that's a crutch. That's certainly not true. I mean, if that was the case, I've seen some hardcore, soldiers, warriors outside the wire, and then come home and be soft marshmallows when it comes to their sons and daughters and home life and that kind of thing. So that's not just who I am. No, you have the capacity and the ability to grow and develop into whatever you choose to be. And that's how human beings work. Again, that goes from the conscious into the subconscious. And that we do have the ability to change, but it's hard work, right? And the comfortable, easy thing to say is, well, that's just who I am. Well, that's a bunch of bullshit. That's exactly what that is. It's a bunch of bullshit. So work on your assessments, right? Work on the trust and credibility. Work on the consistency through engaging with your people. Understand them. Know human nature, right? Know human nature. That is monumental in knowing human nature. And how to communicate that, right? Well, the very first thing in communication will be a nonverbal communication whenever you meet your subordinates, right? And the first thing is how you present yourself. How you present yourself, how you articulate, how you speak. That is the first step in your communication. If you're going to set the example that you're a load of dirty laundry, then you have a hill to climb in gaining trust and credibility. Understand and learn communication, right? Learn it. Learn the 3 parts of communication and how to leverage them in directing, guiding, and influencing people. It'll be well worth your effort, for sure. And again, that is based off of research, building new habits, systems, repetition. It's It's not something that happens overnight, and you will stumble and you will fail, and that's fine. Make sure you stumble and fail openly, right? You're not fallible, right? You're not unfallible, I should say. And your team should know that. You're a human being. If you show that you have an ability to overcome obstacles and overcome mistakes, that lends to your credibility, right? And if you understand that your team is going to make mistakes, right? There is a Stoic philosophy of knowing every day that you will suffer fools, idiots, people that are inconsiderate, are rude, are disrespectful. We know this, right? We know this going in. We know this waking up every day. We know that. The people on your team will stumble, right? They'll stumble, and it might be, out of their zone a little bit, right? That's not their baseline. And that's where the leader in you comes in, right? But you won't know that sitting behind the desk. That's why it's important to know your people and understand human nature. Clear and concise communication would be articulating what needs to get done and why. Now, depending upon the size of your team, keep this in mind. An effective leader as a human being can lead 5, maybe 6 people tops effectively, right? So structure your teams accordingly. And if that means that you pick out 1 or 2 people to head 2 teams, then you deal with those 1 or 2 people. Endless meetings are complete wastes of time. Articulate what needs to get done and why it needs to get done. And then trust your team to effectively come up with a how things are going to get done, right? And it's concise. You keep it simple. You communicate it effectively, and if you've done the communication properly, you already have the feedback that everybody's on the same page and they understand what needs to get done and why it needs to get done. Leave the how up to your subordinates, right? Approve the how, right? Be on the same page. Understand, what they're doing, and tweak when necessary, because that's part of your supervisory duties, right? As a leader. You could be a supervisor without being a leader, but you can't be a leader without supervising. That's just the way it rolls, man. That's what we have to do. So be clear on it and be concise. We don't need long, drawn-out meetings that are taking away valuable time and resources from the team in getting things done, right? And we can channel that through team leaders if you need, or anyone else who's designated as a go-between, right? One of the other things that is a big thing, a big trend, I guess, in management and organizations is empathy. Now, a lot of people tie it in with the active listening and things like that, and I'm a huge believer in active listening. I don't think we're talking apples to apples when we talk about active listening and empathy. And I say this because empathy is very emotionally driven, right? It's trying to understand somebody's emotional state. That's a very difficult thing to do. And as a leader, when we develop professional relationships and then try to understand somebody's emotional state, if they haven't got there if they haven't got to that emotional state based off professional circumstances, and those emotional states are derived from somewhere other than the professional setting, now we're getting into muddy waters, right? And again, here's the caveat. I'm not saying there's no place for empathy and compassion. That's not what I'm saying. Not even a little bit. What I'm saying is this: the more effective angle or the more effective approach is perspective, right? You understand in general terms that somebody has an issue, right? And it's based off of a bunch of emotions or whatever emotional state they may be in, right? But then you have to balance that. You have to kind of understand, okay, at the end of the day, my priorities are the overall goal, my team, and myself. Those are the very top priorities, and they're non-negotiable, right? And that's another video, it's another lesson, it's another course. How is this situation, this emotionally charged situation, how is that balancing? Like, how do we reconcile that against the priorities I'm working under, right? And it does sound cold, and it does sound heartless. At the end of the day, though, we can't put one above the sum of the whole, right? Your credibility will go down. The understanding that something has happened, right? That something is amiss, that something's not where it needs to be on your team, then address it. If you answer an emotional situation with emotion, it's a lost cause. It's a wrap. You're walking into that in an ineffective state across the board. Perspective. It's a logical and rash assessment of somebody's position, right? And then you need to make your best logical, rash decision based off of the totality of those particular circumstances. So that's where I caution on being careful with empathy. And I absolutely fully understand and 100% embrace that makes either myself or anyone seem heartless or cold and callous and all that other type of thing. I mean, that's definitely not the case. It's looking out for everybody's best interest long term. And sometimes empathy and emotion is counter to that. So just a word of caution on empathy. Now, we've talked a little bit about goals here and there. Now we have the overall organizational goal. And as a new leader or somebody in a new leadership role, that is something that is priority one for you above everything else, right? That's the ultimate goal. Based off of that, and based off the objectives of the organization to meet that goal, you need to establish your team's goal, right? Your division, your team's goal, right? And in order to do that, there's a few things you have to keep in mind. They have to be specific goals, right? They have to be exactly what needs to happen. I think that's pretty self-explanatory, right? Very specific goals for your team. They have to be measurable. And that comes back to knowing your team, right? Knowing your team and employing them to their capabilities. You can't give them goals that are unattainable given their skill sets, right? Given their skill set and their capabilities, right? Not everyone's going to be a stud. Not everyone's going to be a superstar. Some people's capabilities and aptitudes will just have to complement each other, right? But if the sum of that doesn't quite meet the mustard when you're setting a goal, if they're not able as a team to meet that goal, you have to reassess, right? The goals have to be measurable and achievable, right? They have to be able to achieve those. They should be challenging though, right? They should challenge your team. That gives you an opportunity to assess them, right? It gives you some coaching opportunities, right? Some mentoring, some remediation, and some obstacles to overcome. And that is true with your teammates. And you, at the end of the day, you need that, right? They have to be challenging but achievable, right? And be flexible with that. Be flexible. Things happen, right? You lose people, you gain people. There's all kinds of variables that you will not, as a new leader, and even as a seasoned leader, you will not think of, right? Murphy's Law has a say in every plan, right? Every single plan. They have to be relevant. Your goals as a team have to be relevant to the overall goals, the overall mission of your organization, right? They have to be in line. So if that means that before you set out those goals and communicate those goals, there's nothing wrong with seeking counsel from your peers on whatever leadership level you're on, or even your higher ups. There's nothing wrong with that. You're still a student as a leader, right? Never stop learning. You're still a student. You're still in kind of the infancy stage. If we look at some of the most effective leaders, they've never stopped learning, right? They've never stopped learning, and there's some great resources out there. And again, I'll throw in a few of the resources in that I feel, or we here at Bare Bones feel, that are extremely valuable for new leaders. I'll throw them down into the description for you. And then time, right? The time bound. So if we look at the goal setting, it has to be achievable within a certain amount of time, right? It can't go on forever. It has to have a starting point and an end point. And those time hacks have to be structured reasonably. And that goes back to knowing your team and understanding their capabilities. And again, be flexible with all of these points, especially as a new leader, right? Expectations are funny. They'll always lead to disappointment, even if somebody in your team hits them for a while, it's inevitable that they're not going to hit them, and it comes right back to disappointment, right? So expectations are a funny thing. They're kind of fickle. There's nothing wrong with standards, though. And if that goal is your standard, they should be separated. Once you have a goal or a mission statement, your standards need to kind of parallel them, right? If it's a lofty goal, the standards should be lofty as well. There should be high standards. If you have a challenging goal or mission statement and then have lower standards, the chances of that goal being met or that mission statement being fulfilled, the law of probability says those chances aren't very good at all, right? So be reasonable, right? Be reasonable in your goals, in your goal settings, and that goes the same with like accountability. When people mess up, and they will, and that is sure to happen, people have to be held accountable. Understand this, though. You, as a leader in a leadership role, are responsible for everything. There's nothing that you're not responsible for. Nothing that you're not responsible for. If somebody didn't do something or meet a time hack, then that either wasn't communicated effectively enough, it wasn't emphasized enough, it wasn't followed up on, it wasn't supervised, it wasn't properly assessed, or it wasn't properly or effectively followed through on. And that falls on you. When we counsel people, that's one of your most important tools, right? Whether it be the initial counseling and you get to know your people and you start kind of building a leader's book on them, and you can kind of plan for different events, different milestones in their life, track their progress, their training, their professional development, the professional acumen, right? How they present. If you can track that on paper in something that's tangible, because you're not going to remember it, then when they do well, then there has to be a positive counseling behind that, right? And if that, at the end of however your year is structured, end of the quarter, end of the half year, the end of the year, that somebody is worthy of recognition, then absolutely 100% ensure that they're recognized. We always praise in public, and we never, this is a cardinal sin, we never ever punish in public. We punish in private, praise in public. 100% of the time. That's non-negotiable. It goes a long way into emphasizing things on both ends, right? If you find yourself in a position where someone has to be held accountable, you maintain your trust and credibility, that it stays within the four walls. You will never discuss it with anyone who doesn't need to know, because you also have to answer to somebody. And that it starts and stops there, right? Once that accountability and or discipline is doled out, boom, clean slate, and we're back at it, right? We're looking through the windshield, not the rearview mirror. That will help you continue your credibility and your trust. And then when we talk about teamwork, right? And that is being fair, firm, and consistent always with your team. Emphasizing the consistency. Make sure that they are recognized when they need to be, held accountable when they need to be, and promote and build an environment of positivity, of professionalism, of free as much as possible, free of negativity and bullshit. That's what will build cohesive teams, right? If somebody is slacking for one reason or another, somebody pick up the slack, right? And if you notice it as a leader before someone else, pick up the slack, right? Build that teamwork that way. Individual strengths within the team, that is you getting off your ass and working with the team, right? Not only is it important for you to continually self-assess, you have to assess the team. You have to. And that will drive training, right? Because that, as a leader, you're an instructor, you're a trainer. That is just an innate responsibility of a leader, is to coach, mentor, train, instruct, remediate, help build, grow, and develop future leaders. And that's what your team is a good way to look at them, right? They're the future leaders, right? You want to build a leader that you wish you had, right? You want to be the leader that you wish you had, and that's how you want to grow and develop your team. So to kind of summarize here, we talked about some of the roles of or a new leader in a leadership role. We talked about a self-assessment, which is ongoing, right? That's lifelong in the leadership world. You're always self-assessing, but be open and honest with yourself, right? The greatest lies we tell are the lies we tell ourselves, right? We bullshit ourselves all the time, right? And that's a hard habit to break. So get feedback on that. We talked about different styles of leadership, and that's something that you will develop a process and figure out what styles are out there and what styles fit your environment and climate. We talked about trust and credibility and how important it is to get out there and talk and understand and know your teams and develop that trust, the credibility, and you're going to do that with consistency, right? We talked about appearance and presentation and being who you pretend to be. Be that. Be who you pretend to be. We talked about a little bit about goals. We talked a little bit about accountability. We talked a little bit about structuring goals and how the SMART system works: specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time bound. Those, if you hit those points in constructing your goals, you're in a good spot. The biggest takeaway is that it's work, right? It's work. You, as an individual, may